Welcome, everybody. I'm Danielle Palli, a board certified positive psychology and mindfulness coach. And today I'm joined by my friend and fellow coach, Toni Bator. Toni, thank you for being here yet again for the third part in our series.
Thank you, Danielle. And I'm excited about this.
I learn so much from you every time we chat. So Toni is a neurodiversity and positive psychology coach with a wealth of specialties and knowledge. And today we're talking about neurodiversity and autism. So let's dive in. So
Mhm.
Toni, can you explain the difference between neurodiversity and autism?
Yes, neurodiversity is it's a concept that came about in the 1990s by Judy Singer. I think was a psychiatrist or psychologist. It's a social movement that suggests that there are neurological differences and that they're the result of natural variations in the human genome. So conditions like autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, um, that they're not disorders that need to be cured, but they are variations in the brain.
Okay.
Okay. And autism spectrum disorder it falls under the umbrella of neurodiversity.
Okay.
So it's a neurodevelopmental disorder and it's characterized by social communication challenges, sensory issues, language, and rigidity in thinking. Does
Okay.
that help at all?
Yes, it does. So neurodiversity is kind of the umbrella. So you can be neurodiverse and not autistic, but if you're autistic, you have some type of neurodiversity. Is that safe to say?
Say that again.
So under the umbrella, so you can be neurodiverse in the broad
Yes,
category without being autistic.
correct.
But if you're autistic, you are under that umbrella of you are neurodiverse. It's one of those
Exactly.
IQ questions. They try to trick you. The wombats are all this, but I can give you an example.
Yeah.
So I believe myself to be an HSP, a highly sensitive person. I'm
Hmm.
also one of the rare introverts on the Myers-Briggs who fits into the INFJ. And some people will say, well, okay, well, if you're a rare personality type and you have this HSP, you're neurodiverse, which I've never considered myself that. So, what's the defining line when people start using the term neurodiversity?
This is such an interesting question, right? And in some arenas, bipolar is considered to fall under neurodiversity. Um, but the hardliners only consider autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, um, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette's, OCD as truly neurodiversity. So it varies. Anxiety can also be considered under neurodiversity.
Okay.
I don't think that there has been a decision about, which mental health,
Okay.
um, challenges are included under neurodiversity.
Okay. Now, the terms that you mentioned, such as dyslexia, ADHD, Tourette's, OCD, under neurodiversity, are they considered to fall under the autism spectrum?
No,
No. Okay.
no. Yeah, autism spectrum is a different, it's a condition just like ADHD, Tourette's, and they all fall under neurodiversity.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a specific um, condition.
Okay. Can
Mhm.
you talk about what it means to be autistic? What are some of the signs?
This is why they call it a spectrum, right? Um, a person with autism can be completely nonverbal, and we don't use this term anymore, but it used to be referred to as low functioning, that they may not even be able to um, do anything for themselves. Um, they can be so limited.
Okay.
And then you have on the other extreme someone who can be a software engineer, doing coding, brilliant, and has issues with social cues, communication, um, and sensory issues. So, and then you have people in the middle, but everyone's different.
Okay. So the key indicator for finding out if someone's neurodiverse versus on the autism spectrum is probably talking to a professional who has those guideposts who can diagnose and see where a person falls if that's necessary.
Yes, and there are many people who have dual diagnosis, such as those who have autism. Many also have ADHD. So there's
Okay.
coexisting. Yeah.
Okay. So, when I talk to people who are neurodiverse or they might have ADHD,
Hmm.
I try to help them tap into their superpower because a
Mm,
lot of times they focus on the not good enough and what I can't do, but
yeah.
they have some really critical powers that they can tap into, hyper focusing to problem solve. When I would give up on a problem and say this can't be solved, so I think a neurodiverse person is like, I'm going to solve it if I have to, like, and they can hyper focus and figure it out, whereas I
Yeah.
give up, right? Uh,
Right, right.
Creative problem solving, looking at things that
Mhm.
other people wouldn't think about. What are some of the other superpowers that can work to their advantage?
Well, I think that, like you said, creative, innovative, keen intuition and insight, um, adaptability sometimes, and those who are neurodivergent who have ADHD are excellent entrepreneurs. Think outside the box,
Yeah.
right? Um, those with autism spectrum disorder, they are very loyal, very honest.
Yeah.
You can expect to hear the truth.
Yes.
What they say, they mean. Yes, yeah.
That's just kind of not only refreshing, but in a work environment, you have to develop trust to work well together. If you're constantly wondering if what you're hearing is the truth or not, that's very draining and hard on a relationship. So, yes,
Mm,
for honesty.
yeah, yeah, it's a
Yeah, so
wonderful
it's maybe
trait.
tapping into and sometimes people don't necessarily know what that superpower is, so we work together and find out what are you exceptional at? What are you better at than anyone else? Because there's always something, right?
Always.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how do individuals who've been diagnosed with, say, ADHD or ASD feel about people who diagnose themselves?
Mm. Well, I hear that the so-called self-diagnosis of conditions, such as ADHD and ASD, is definitely influential. It's a trend among many young people, especially on social media.
Mm.
Um, and I think that the diagnosis can be a misleading concept because it implies that in labeling their experience, that lay people are really engaging in medical practice, right? I mean, you don't hear about people going around saying, I'm schizophrenic,
Right, right.
right? No, really, I am. I think I have the symptoms. I'm definitely schizophrenic. Yeah, so it can be really dangerous. So those who have been evaluated and properly diagnosed, they feel also that the self-diagnosis impacts the services that they desperately vie for.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So if somebody self-diagnoses versus someone who's diagnosed, they're not necessarily getting the access that the person who's really diagnosed would need. Is that kind of
that's exactly
okay?
correct. I have some clients that I see through an agency that receives funding through Mass Rehab Commission and Department of Developmental Services, which allows individual to have additional services like case management. And sometimes if you self-diagnose, the people that actually are evaluated will not be able to get those services if it's being taken by others who aren't diagnosed properly.
And I think that too, the flip side of that, one of the two things that bring to mind here, when you probably have a copy as well of the DSM-5 with all the, and they'll say, okay, if you have 5 of this, you have this particular diagnosis. Well, all of us can flip through that and be like, well, I do that. Well, I do
Yeah.
that sometimes because we're human. So we have
Hmm.
some of these traits. So there's the danger of the self-labeling. I will say, it can be helpful to understand yourself better if you suspect that you might be. I know, someone that I'm close to and myself had gone through these online battery of neurodiverse tests. And mine was like, nope, you're neurotypical, go away. And theirs was like, which we suspected was not, like they were just showing signs. And to me, I
Uh-huh.
think using those tools can be helpful in understanding yourself if you want to take that to get a proper diagnosis. But we wouldn't
Yes.
necessarily recommend that person who suspects they are to just
Mhm.
declare it. And that's where it can be tricky.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the safest thing to do. And also one of the advantages of being evaluated and getting the proper diagnosis is that if you're working and you find that you need reasonable accommodations, you will need the actual diagnosis in order to apply and receive reasonable accommodations.
Yeah. We can talk all day about this because what I can tell people when people come to me and they say there are certain work environments that are tricky for them. I know I myself do not thrive in a very noisy, hectic environment where there's a lot going on. That's why I
Hmm.
love working from home and having one-on-one conversations for the most part. Um,
Yes.
some people, as you said, aren't necessarily able to do that. But one of the things where this can be helpful is when they say, well, should I get a diagnosis? My question is, well, how is it impacting your life? So can you suspect that you have a diagnosis, but you don't know? And yet, if you put certain things in place, like I know I'm going to block off quiet time to focus on something and not schedule any meetings. So if you can work your life around it and your life is thriving, you
Hmm.
you probably don't need it. If it's impacting your life in a negative way, to me, that would be the sign like to talk to someone. Would you agree, disagree?
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. And you are finding people that are being evaluated and diagnosed much later in life.
When we talk to people who are diagnosed late, it's like suddenly, oh, this all makes sense.
Right. And
And now
also a
I
sadness,
know.
right? A
Yeah.
sadness like, why didn't someone do something
Yeah.
earlier?
And why didn't we know earlier? So it's kind of a relief, like, okay, now
Yeah.
this makes sense, but also like I could have done things so much differently had I known sooner, which I think is a story for many, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So we want to leave this on a positive note and so that people understand that it's not gloom and doom, that there are positive aspects of having neurodiversity or even being on the autism spectrum. So what are some positive takeaways that we can leave our listeners?
Mm. I think that I have encountered some of the most brilliant individuals who are excelling in and flourishing in their life in industries that they are passionate about. And it is such an honor to be witness to that. And for anyone and everyone, on the spectrum, I just tell you that believe in yourself because you can do anything.
Toni, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.